My name is Ethan, and my dad told me flat out 80% of my salary goes to my drug-addicted brother and the rest to cover his bills. When I refused, he filed a fake complaint to my HR department. That should have ruined me. Instead, I smiled. Because he didn't know he was handing me the perfect reason to disappear forever. I'm Nam, and this story will leave you breathless. I was standing by the kitchen counter staring at my phone screen like it was some kind of ticking bomb. The message from my dad just sat there, 6 words that told me everything I needed to know. Family meeting. Tonight. No excuses, 7 p.m. I knew what that meant. I had seen it coming for weeks, maybe months. The passive-aggressive comments, the guilt-laced phone calls, the way Jake kept texting me those cryptic things like he was laying the groundwork for something big. I should have ignored it or made up an excuse, but I didn't. A part of me wanted to see how far they were willing to go this time. So I drove over to my childhood home in South Austin, the same one with the half-dead lawn and the rusted mailbox my dad still hadn't fixed since 2009. I parked my car across the street and just sat there for a minute watching the porch light flicker. My hands were already sweating. I hadn't been here in almost a year, and yet every inch of it looked exactly the same, like time just stood still in that house. When I walked in, my dad was already at the dining table, arms folded, jaw clenched like he'd been rehearsing this moment for weeks. Jake was sitting across from him, hoodie up, headphones around his neck, bouncing his leg like a teenager even though he was 26 now. The smell of microwaved lasagna hung in the air and some sports game was playing low on the living room TV. Just enough to be annoying. I nodded at them, sat down quietly. No hugs, no greetings, just silence that felt like static in my ears. Dad cleared his throat. So, let's get to it. I waited, letting him speak first. That's how he liked it. Always had to be the one holding the mic, so to speak. Your brother's had a rough few years, he said, pointing unnecessarily at Jake, who didn't even look up. He's trying to get his life back together. That takes resources. Time, money, support. I said nothing. And as his brother, I think it's only right that you contribute. You've got a good job now. You're making what 6 figures. I didn't answer, but he didn't need me to. He kept going. Jake's going to enroll in a program. Rehab therapy, skills training, maybe some vocational courses. And of course he'll need a place to stay, food, transportation, the basics. Which brings us to the plan. He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his shirt pocket and laid it flat on the table like it was a business contract. 80% of your monthly salary goes toward Jake. 20% to help me cover the house and utilities. That way you're supporting the family, doing your part. I looked at the paper, then back at him. Jake still hadn't said a word. And what about me? I finally asked, my voice calm, even though I could feel the blood rushing to my ears. What do I get? Dad narrowed his eyes like I had just asked the dumbest question in the world. You get peace of mind. You get to be a good son. You get to know you helped rebuild this family after your mother left us in pieces. She died, I said flatly. She didn't leave. He waved it off like that detail wasn't relevant. Jake finally looked up, his eyes glassy, maybe from something he'd smoked earlier, or maybe just shame. But there wasn't much of that in our family, shame, just blame and silence. You know I'm trying, man, Jake mumbled. It's not like I asked to be like this. I stared at him for a long time. I remembered the last time he showed up at my apartment, stole 2 of my watches and pawned them the next day. I remembered the time he crashed my car and blamed the brakes. The time he got arrested and listed me as his emergency contact without asking. And still I didn't say any of it out loud. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and smiled. Sure, I said. Sounds fair. Dad's eyebrows twitched, caught off guard. Jake blinked. So you're in? Dad asked. Yeah, why not? I stood up, pushed the chair in gently and grabbed my keys. That's all you said, everything that needed to be said. He looked suspicious, like he didn't believe it could be that easy, but I didn't give him a reason to question it. I walked out calm and slow, like nothing had just happened. Back in my car, I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, both hands gripping the wheel. I could still hear his voice in my head, that smug certainty. 80 for Jake, 20 for me. Like I was some kind of walking ATM. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even hurt. What I felt was quiet, cold, focused. This time they'd gone too far. And for once I wasn't going to yell or argue or storm out. This time I'd let them believe they'd won. And then I'd take everything back. The night air was thick with that humid stillness Austin gets in early spring. I drove aimlessly for a while past the Shell station on Lamar, through the neighborhoods I used to ride my bike in as a kid. Windows down, music low, not really listening to the song, just needing noise that didn't come with demands or guilt. I ended up at Zilker Park, parked by the edge, and just sat there. I hadn't been to this spot in years. It used to be where Mom and I would come every Sunday after church when Dad stayed home to nap or watch football. She'd pack peanut butter sandwiches and a thermos of sweet tea, and we'd sit on the same bench under the tall oak near the trail. That was our thing. Ours. I closed my eyes and could still hear her laugh, light and breathy like wind through glass. She had a way of making everything seem manageable even when it wasn't, especially when it wasn't. Mom wasn't like the rest of our family. She was soft in a house that didn't allow softness. Mark believed in order, routine, punishment. He treated parenting like basic training, and Jake and I were just recruits in his little boot camp. Jake got away with everything, though. He could lie, steal, fail out of school, and Dad would just shake his head and say, "Boys will be boys." But when I came home with a B+ in calculus, it was like I had personally insulted his legacy. Mom saw it. She saw all of it. She used to tuck me in and whisper things like, "I know you're doing your best," or "He's wrong, you're not weak." I think she knew I was fading under the weight of all that silence and expectation. When I was 14, she tried to leave. I didn't know it at the time. I found out years later, after she died, in a letter she had hidden in a shoebox with some old birthday cards and receipts. She wrote about her plan to take me and disappear. She had researched apartments in San Antonio, talked to a lawyer about custody, even opened a separate bank account. But Dad found out. He made her quit her job at the library, shut down the account, and convinced the pastor at our church to counsel her about the importance of unity. After that, she stopped trying. Something in her just dimmed. The cancer came fast. Stage 4 by the time she noticed the pain in her ribs wasn't just from sleeping funny. She was gone within 7 months. I was 17. Jake didn't even come to the hospital most days. Dad barely left the room, though, hovering over her like he was the one being punished. At her funeral, he gave a eulogy about strength and sacrifice and how she was the backbone of our family. I wanted to scream. She wasn't the backbone. She was the only soft place we had, and he broke her. After she died, the house got quieter. Not peaceful, just empty. Jake moved into his rebellion full-time, and Dad buried himself in work and Fox News. I started working after school, kept my head down, made myself as invisible as possible. That was the safest way to survive in a house where love was conditional and silence was weaponized. But I never forgot that shoebox. I kept it. Still have it, actually, in my apartment closet under an old pair of sneakers. Sometimes I take the letter out and reread it just to remind myself that once someone wanted to save me. Even if she failed, she tried, and no one else ever has. I pulled into my complex just after midnight, the parking lot half empty, the porch lights flickering like always. My apartment was quiet, clean, nothing out of place. I kicked off my shoes, sat on the edge of the couch, and stared at my phone again. I had 23 unread messages, all from Dad and Jake, some angry, some guilt-tripping. One from Jake said, "Please, man, I really need this. I'm drowning here." I put the phone face down and turned off the lamp. In the dark, I let my mind go to places I hadn't visited in a long time. That bench in Zilker, the smell of lemon hand lotion Mom used, the way her voice would tighten when she tried to hide that she was scared. I hadn't cried when she died. Not really. Not until years later when I got accepted into UT and realized she wasn't there to see it. That was the first time I let myself grieve. The second was now sitting in my apartment with her letter in my lap and my entire childhood unraveling like thread pulled too tight. There was a knock at the door, not loud, not urgent, just 2 short taps. I wiped my face and stood slowly. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there was no one there. Just an envelope taped to the frame, my name written in thick blue ink. Inside was a note from HR at my company. Apparently, someone had submitted an anonymous complaint about my abandonment of familial obligations and neglect of dependent relatives. No signature, no contact info. But I didn't need it. I knew exactly where it came from. I stood there, note in hand, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about family anymore. This was a war, and it was time I stopped playing defense. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor with the letter from HR in one hand and my laptop open in front of me, digging through policy documents, employee support resources, anything that could explain how an anonymous complaint like that even made it to my personnel file. The more I read, the angrier I got. Whoever wrote it knew exactly what they were doing. The wording wasn't random. They'd framed it like I was neglecting legal obligations, as if I owed them something, as if I hadn't spent every single year since I turned 18 fighting to stay above water while Jake drowned himself on purpose. I thought about that first apartment I rented when I left home. It was barely 500 square feet, smelled like mildew, and the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbor argue with his girlfriend every night. I worked double shifts at a diner and did a tea help desk overnight. I used to keep ramen in my glove box and sleep in my car between jobs sometimes. Nobody helped me. Not once. Not Dad, not Jake. I'd show up to family holidays with a box of store-brand cookies and leave before dinner was over. I was the ghost brother, the disappointment who didn't make trouble so they didn't make room for me either. I put myself through school at UT Austin, got scholarships, work-study gigs, lived on campus in a dorm that reeked of burnt popcorn and anxiety. I graduated top of my class with a degree in computer engineering and a minor in business. I thought maybe if I really made it, they'd see me differently. Respect me, or at the very least leave me alone. Vertex Systems hired me straight out of college. My starting salary was $95,000 a year, more than my dad ever made in the military, more than I thought I'd see before 30. I remember standing in my empty apartment the night after I signed the contract, holding a cheap beer and thinking I did this. I actually did it. But the congratulations never came. Dad barely responded to the news. Jake sent a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No one asked what the job was. No one asked what I built, what problems I solved, what it felt like to finally be okay. I spent the next 4 years working my way up. I took the worst clients, the hardest deadlines, pulled weekends, holidays. My manager, Claire, noticed. She put me in for a promotion, and 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, I became the lead engineer for our cloud infrastructure division. I was proud not because of the title, but because I earned it. No favors, no shortcuts, just grit and long nights and a refusal to give up. That same week, my dad called. I remember staring at the screen as it rang, debating whether to answer. He rarely called unless something was wrong or he needed something. I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe he heard about the promotion. Maybe he wanted to say he was proud. He didn't. He asked if I could come by the house that weekend. Said there was something we needed to talk about as a family. His tone was casual, rehearsed. I didn't catch the edge until later. I asked if it was about Jake. He said no, not exactly. I should have known that meant yes. I said fine. I'd be there. The rest of that week blurred together. Meetings, code reviews, onboarding a new intern. I was too distracted to enjoy any of it. A small part of me wanted that meeting to go well. Wanted him to acknowledge what I'd built. I even brought a bottle of wine, some expensive red I knew he used to like. I left it in the car when I pulled up just in case. Now I couldn't stop replaying every second of that night. The smug way he laid out the payment plan like it was a business agreement. The silence from Jake like this wasn't his mess. The way I smiled and nodded while my stomach turned inside out. I sat at my kitchen table and started writing numbers. My current take-home, rent, bills, savings. The loan I was still helping my ex-roommate pay off because I co-signed like an idiot. If I really gave them 80%, I'd be back in that mildew-smelling apartment. And for what? So Jake could sit at home high and call that recovery. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Jake. I know you're mad, but this is my chance. Don't blow it for me. No apology, no accountability, just manipulation dressed in desperation. I blocked the number. Then I opened a new document on my laptop, a personal statement, not for work, for myself. I titled it Boundary Plan. The first bullet point was simple. Stop letting people rewrite history just because they don't like how it reflects on them. I kept writing. I listed everything I'd done to survive, to grow, to become the person I was now. Every time I chose peace over pettiness. Every time I let something slide because I was tired of being the problem. And at the end of the list, I wrote one sentence in bold: no one saved me. Not then, not now. I shut the laptop and leaned back in my chair. My jaw ached from how tight I'd been clenching it. I hadn't even noticed. That envelope from HR was still on the counter. I picked it up, folded it twice, and slid it into a drawer next to the lease on my apartment. Let them come. I was ready this time. The text started the next morning. Dad sent one at 6:42 a.m. like he was trying to catch me off guard before work. Let me know once the transfer's done. We need to plan the next steps for Jake. No good morning. No how are you. Just straight to the demand. I didn't reply. At 9:15, Jake called. I let it ring out. Then he called again. Then again. On the fourth time, I answered mostly out of morbid curiosity. Hey, man, he said, voice shaky. I'm not doing great. I really need this. I didn't say anything. You know I'm trying, he went on. That place Dad found, it's solid. Real program, not one of those scam ones. I just need a few months. You can afford it, man. I took a deep breath. Jake, I said how much of this plan was your idea. Silence. Then a sniff. You think I like this? Begging you, I'm your brother. That's exactly why I'm asking. Because if you really wanted help, you wouldn't let him use you like a pawn. He started to say something, maybe argue, maybe cry. I hung up. By lunchtime, the guilt parade began. My Aunt Jean texted me some long message about how family meant sacrifice and how my mother would be ashamed of how selfish I'd become. I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. Somehow she felt qualified to weigh in. My cousin dropped a comment under an old Facebook photo I'd forgotten was still public. Something vague but pointed. Must be nice to forget where you came from. I spent the rest of the day deleting, blocking, and breathing through the tightness building in my chest. That night I made pasta and didn't eat it. Instead, I opened my laptop and started looking up something I'd never thought I'd need to know. Filial responsibility laws in Texas. Turns out they exist. Not often enforced, but technically parents can sue their adult children for support under certain conditions, especially if the parent is considered indigent and the child is financially stable. It was rare but not impossible. I kept reading case after case, state statutes, legal forums. Most lawyers said the cases were hard to win, especially if the parent had assets or if there was documented emotional or financial abuse. Still, the possibility was enough to make me pause. So I did what I should have done years ago. I called Miles Griffith. Miles was an old friend of Claire's, my manager at Vertex. He specialized in family law and estate protection. We'd met briefly at a company dinner 2 years ago. He'd struck me as sharp and unflinchingly direct. He answered on the third ring. "Ethan Parker," he said, like he'd been expecting the call. To what do I owe the pleasure? I gave him the short version. The demand, the texts, the anonymous HR complaint, the possibility of legal action. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked only one question. "Do you want to cut ties clean, or are you hoping to negotiate?" I didn't answer right away. "I wasn't sure," he continued. "Because if you want out, really out, we can make that happen. But it's not just paperwork, it's a mindset. You have to be ready to stop looking for them to change." That hit harder than I expected. "Send me everything," he said. "I'll review the harassment, the complaint, and we'll draft a cease and desist. From there, we'll set up a boundary agreement. It won't be legally binding, but it'll set precedent if they try anything in court." We hung up after 20 minutes. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, trying to figure out why my hands were shaking. It wasn't fear. It was grief. Not for them, for the hope I was finally letting go of. Later that week, Miles sent me the first draft of the letter. It was professional but firm. It outlined the pattern of manipulation and harassment, the false complaint, and the financial demands. It stated clearly that any future contact not initiated by me would be considered harassment and responded to legally. I forwarded it to Claire just to keep her in the loop. She replied within the hour. "Proud of you. Let me know if they escalate. We've got your back." I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until I did. A few days later, I passed by a coworker's desk and saw them scrolling through a Reddit thread titled "When Your Family Thinks Your Paycheck is Theirs." It had over 12,000 upvotes. I clicked it open that night and read every comment. So many stories like mine. So many people who'd been told that love meant compliance, that family meant obligation, that silence was safer than resistance. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in it. I printed out Miles's letter, signed it, and mailed it certified the next morning. Control wasn't something I'd ever had in that family, but now it was mine. The first email came on a Thursday morning. Subject line in all caps: "Family abandoner in your ranks." I was halfway through my second coffee, buried in a bug report, when it flagged it and forwarded it to HR. By noon, 5 more had landed, all from different Gmail accounts, all saying some version of the same thing. "Your lead engineer is a fraud. He left his sick father and troubled brother to suffer while he lives large. Ask him about the rehab money. Ask him about what he really did with his mom's life insurance." Shameful. I stared at the screen, numb. They weren't even good lies. But they were personal. They were deliberate. And whoever wrote them knew exactly what strings to pull. Claire called me into her office before I could finish reading the 6th one. She looked calm but focused, the way she did during major system outages. "Close the door," she said. I did. "We've received 7 emails this morning. One was flagged as threatening, the rest They're clearly targeting you." I nodded. I was expecting something eventually. "Just not this. Do you have any idea who could be behind them?" "Yes," I said. "My brother." Her eyebrows lifted, but she didn't look surprised, just disappointed. Not in me, in the situation. I want you to know we're treating this seriously. I've already looped in legal. We're conducting a review to make sure there's no exposure, but I'm not worried. You've been nothing but professional here. I appreciate that. That said, she continued, I'd recommend stepping back from social media for a while. Lock down your profiles. Set everything to private. If you have anything publicly tied to the company, take it down. It was the right call. I knew it. Still, the weight of it sat heavy in my chest. This wasn't just some family spat anymore. It was public, it was hostile, and it was calculated. I went home early that day, sat in front of my laptop, logged into every account I had, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Reddit, even that old blog I hadn't touched since grad school. I scrubbed everything, changed usernames, updated passwords, turned off search indexing. By the time I finished, it felt like I'd erased part of my identity just to protect the other. Then I opened a new incognito window and searched the email phrasing. One sentence popped up in a recent post on a local community gossip forum. There are people out there who get rich and forget the people who raised them. One guy I know works at a big tech firm in Austin and hasn't sent a cent to his family even though his brother is in recovery and his dad is sick. The user had no profile pic. Username was something random, but the writing sounded familiar. I opened my coding tools, ran the post through a metadata scraper. Nothing definitive. Then I dug deeper, traced the IP to a city server in Cedar Park. That narrowed it down. I kept going, pulled the headers from the emails, cross-referenced the routes, and there it was. Same IP block, same network path. Jake. I sat back in my chair, breathing slow. I should have been furious, but I wasn't. I was sad, deep, hollow sad, the kind that made your bones ache. He didn't even try to hide it well. He wanted me to know. He wanted to hurt me. I documented everything, took screenshots, time-stamped the headers, saved the post links. I'd send them to Miles in the morning. Just after midnight, Claire texted me. Let me know if you want help drafting a public statement, or we can say nothing. I've got your back either way. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Let's wait. I want to see what he does next, she replied with a thumbs up and nothing more. I walked to the window, looked out over the quiet complex. Lights were off in most of the units. The pool was still reflecting the dim glow of the security lamp. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt prepared. Jake had chosen the battlefield. Now I'd choose the terms. The envelope arrived by certified mail on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a sprint review with my team when the front desk buzzed to let me know something needed my signature. I walked down, signed without thinking, and didn't open the envelope until I was back at my desk. Inside was a letter from a firm in Waco. Mark's signature sat at the bottom of the attached affidavit. The letter claimed I had a legal obligation to support my aging father and financially assist in the social rehabilitation of my dependent brother. They cited a subsection of Texas Family Code I'd already read a dozen times. A half-baked threat wrapped in official stationery. I called Miles immediately. He picked up on the first ring. We've been expecting this, he said. Forward it over. I'll draft a response. He sounded calm, almost amused, like this wasn't just strategy, it was sport. 2 hours later, he sent me a copy of our response. It was sharper, cleaner, colder. The letter stated that I rejected all financial claims, noted the pattern of documented harassment, and included a copy of the cease and desist Miles had sent earlier. Then came the final paragraph. In light of the baseless legal threats and continued harassment, we are initiating a request to review Mark Parker's financial assets, property holdings, and income history. Any discrepancies or evidence of concealed assets will be presented if further legal action is pursued. It was a warning shot, and a smart one. I read it twice before replying. Let's send it. Already did he texted back. That night I sat on my balcony watching the lights of downtown Austin blur against the evening sky. The city felt smaller somehow, or maybe I was just done with it. I'd spent a decade building a life here, but now every corner of it felt touched by them. My family, their chaos, their need. I opened my laptop and logged into the internal transfer portal at Vertex. Seattle had posted a senior lead opening 3 weeks ago. I hadn't applied then. Now I did. Filled out the request form, attached my updated portfolio, and submitted it with a single click. Claire called me the next morning. I saw the request, she said. You okay? Yeah, I said. Just need distance and a new chapter. She paused, then said, You're one of the best we have. I'll support the transfer. But selfishly, I'm going to miss having you here. Thanks, Claire. That means a lot. Seattle felt right. Rainy, quiet, far. A place where I could rebuild without their shadows crawling across every decision. The next week passed in a blur. I avoided social media, ignored the handful of blocked calls that came through as voicemails. One from Dad's lawyer stating they were reviewing our response. One from Jake slurring something about being betrayed. I deleted both without listening to the end. Miles called me on Friday. Their side hasn't responded since our last letter, he said. Radio silence usually means regrouping, but I wouldn't be surprised if they backed off. What if they don't? I asked. Then we escalate. Public record requests, asset audits. We make it very uncomfortable for them to keep pushing. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. And Ethan, he added, I'm proud of you. Most people fold, you didn't. I hung up and stood in the middle of my apartment. Boxes lined the wall now. I'd started packing even before the transfer was approved. Something about the motion kept me sane, kept me moving forward. The past was still there lurking, but it didn't own me anymore. Not my name, not my money, not my peace. Seattle was calling, and this time I'd be the one choosing who came with me. The box was labeled Maya C, written in thick black marker. I hadn't opened it in years. It sat in the back of my closet like a time capsule I wasn't ready to unseal. But that afternoon, with the rain drumming steady against the apartment windows and my Seattle start date confirmed, I found myself kneeling on the floor and slicing the tape. Old photos, college IDs, a broken wristwatch, and tucked between a stack of postcards and a faded graduation program was a worn leather notebook, my mom's handwriting across the front, Lena's thoughts. I sat back, heart already thudding. I hadn't read it since high school. She used to write late at night at the kitchen table after she thought we were all asleep. Back then I didn't understand why she always looked so tired in the mornings. I opened to a random page. Her handwriting was neat, looping slightly tilted. Jake threw a tantrum again. Mark yelled louder this time. Ethan just stood there quiet. He always stands quiet. I worry he's learning to disappear. I swallowed hard and turned a few more pages. Memories blurred and resurfaced. School lunches, doctor visits, quiet reassurances whispered in the dark. And then I found it. I know you'll have to stand up one day, it read. Maybe when I'm not there to soften the edges. But please don't carry revenge in your chest. It's a fire that eats its own flame. You deserve peace more than victory. Own your life. That's how you win. I stared at the page until the ink blurred. She knew. Even back then, she knew what kind of war I'd face, and she didn't ask me to fight. She asked me to choose peace. I closed the journal and held it tight in my lap. For years, I thought cutting them off would be enough. Then I thought maybe legal retaliation would feel like justice. But none of it erased the ache. None of it gave me the calm she wanted for me. So I made a new plan. Not retaliation, erasure. Not just moving, disappearing. I made a list. New bank accounts, new address, private contact info. I'd already filed the transfer, but now I'd go further. No forwarding address, no digital breadcrumbs, a reset. I picked up my phone and texted Tracy Bell. "You still doing those data scrubbing services you used to talk about?" She replied in 5 minutes. "Yep, even better ones now. You ready to ghost the world pretty much?" We met the next day at a coffee shop in East Austin. Tracy looked the same. Sharp eyes, quick smile. She slid her laptop across the table and got to work. First we pulled everything: data brokers, people finder sites, public records. Then we started the takedowns, subscriptions, removal requests, legal blocks. She explained how to lock down credit reports, hide property ownership, reroute mail through layered forwarding services. "It'll take a few weeks to propagate," she said, "but you'll be damn near invisible unless you want to be found." "Perfect." She paused. "Want to talk about what triggered all this?" "Not really." "Fair. You always did bottle it." I gave a tight smile. Some bottles were meant to stay sealed. When I got home, I backed up my files, encrypted the important ones, and formatted my personal devices. Every photo I wanted to keep went on a hard drive I'd store in a safe deposit box in Seattle. I changed my name on all subscription services, used a virtual mailbox, set up alerts for any financial activity tied to my old address, burned through a checklist that spanned 7 pages. And when I was done, I sat in the empty apartment and stared out at the skyline one last time. The city was buzzing, alive, indifferent. It never really noticed me, but now it wouldn't find me either. The plane touched down at SeaTac just before noon. Gray clouds hung low, thick with moisture, but the rain held off. I stepped out of the terminal and into air that smelled like pine and seawater. Different, clean, the kind of air that didn't carry memories. The company had arranged a short-term rental downtown, a quiet 1-bedroom overlooking Elliott Bay. I dropped my bags, walked to the window, and just stood there. Boats rocked gently in the marina. Ferries moved like whispers across the water. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was being watched. I changed my number that same night, deleted every last social app, deactivated email accounts that bore my old name. I signed up for utilities under a trust name Miles helped me set up. Even my Amazon account was new. On Monday, I reported to the Seattle office. The building was all glass and steel, sitting on the edge of the tech corridor like it had always belonged there. Inside, it felt familiar and foreign at once, like a version of my life with none of the history. The HR lead handed me a badge with a fresh photo and a new title: Senior Systems Architect. I clipped it to my collar and felt the weight of it settle. Not pride, not fear, just the quiet certainty of a clean slate. Claire called that evening. "I heard you landed safely," she said. "Seattle's lucky to have you." "Thanks, Claire, for everything." She paused for a beat. "You're the only person I know who can walk away with your head high. That's rare." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said the only thing that felt true. It wasn't easy. "Nothing worth doing ever is," she replied, then let me go. Training started the next morning. The team was a mix of new grads and mid-career transfers. They looked at me like I had answers. I gave them what I could. Explained systems integration, deployment models, network redundancy. Nothing fancy, just the truth, clean and simple. By the end of the week, the team lead, a guy named Darius, pulled me aside. "You've got a calm way of explaining things," he said. "People listen to that." I nodded. Years of being ignored trained me to speak when it mattered. The days settled into rhythm. Mornings were misty quiet. I walked to work, ate lunch alone by choice. Evenings were for books, cooking, and staring at the water. I didn't miss the noise, I didn't miss the guilt, I didn't miss anything. One night I passed a street musician playing something slow on a saxophone. The notes curled through the cold like smoke. I stopped and listened, hands in my pockets, face tilted to the drizzle. He caught my eye and nodded once like we shared something unnamed. I went home and slept better than I had in years. There were no more texts, no more emails, no random phone numbers trying to pierce my quiet. Tracy messaged me to say the last of the takedown requests had gone through. Online, I didn't exist. It was strange how quickly the absence of something could feel like peace. I kept my journal on the nightstand, not my mom's, my own. I wrote one line every night, nothing dramatic, just enough to anchor the day. Today I finished a server migration. Today I made soup from scratch. Today no one asked for anything I didn't want to give. Seattle didn't know me, and that was the point. I wasn't running. I was choosing quiet, choosing space, choosing myself. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the next blow. I wasn't preparing for the next guilt trip or apology that came with strings. I wasn't performing for forgiveness, I was just living, and no one from my old life could touch it. The news came on a Sunday morning. I was sitting at a small cafe on Alki Beach sipping black coffee and watching the fog roll in across the Sound when my phone buzzed. One notification. A message from Tracy. "You might want to see this, front page of the Tribune." I tapped the link. The headline hit hard and sharp. "Local man charged in multi-state online scam network." The photo was unmistakable. Jake, thinner than I remembered, hair pulled back, wearing a rumpled hoodie and handcuffs. The article laid it all out. Fake charities. Digital fundraising campaigns for non-existent rehab programs. Bitcoin wallet fraud. Multiple victims across 3 states. And the kicker, investigators linked the scam accounts to early activity from the same IP addresses used in anonymous harassment campaigns last year. He had left a trail, a sloppy one, and it had circled back. I kept reading. Apparently, a cybercrime division in Houston caught wind after one of Jake's victims filed a detailed complaint citing a pattern of digital manipulation that sounded eerily familiar. Law enforcement followed the trail to one of the email accounts, then the IP, then him. I set my phone down. The waiter came by, asked if I wanted more coffee. I nodded, thanked him, folded the newspaper someone had left behind, and slid it across the table. Later that afternoon, I found the second article, this one smaller. Financial Crimes Bulletin. Mark Parker, retired military officer under IRS investigation for undeclared assets and pension abuse. He'd been using outdated address records to claim dual benefits. It wasn't just a paperwork error, it was layered, intentional. Someone flagged it after reviewing tied dependents. The article didn't say who tipped them off. I didn't smile. I didn't frown either. I just felt nothing. No victory, no vindication, no deep cinematic sense of justice. Just stillness. I closed the article and opened the drawer in my desk. Inside was the leather-bound journal, my mother's. I placed the folded article beside it and shut the drawer. They were getting back what they put into the world. That was enough. No press statements, no social media posts, no "I told you so's," only silence. It wasn't revenge, it was release. That evening I walked to the waterfront, watched a cargo ship slide across the gray horizon. The air was cold, crisp, clean. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, breath fogging softly in the wind. They were still there somewhere. Jake probably in a holding cell. Mark maybe pacing the halls of some cheap apartment waiting for a knock he couldn't stop. And I I wasn't even a memory to them anymore. Not a number, not a source, not a target, just gone. And they would never catch up to the peace I'd already found. The office was quiet walls painted a soft gray, the kind of neutral tone designed not to provoke. I sat on the edge of the couch, palms pressed against my knees, waiting for the session to start. Across from me, Dr. Halden Shaw scribbled something in a leather-bound notebook, then looked up with a warm, patient expression. He adjusted his glasses and said nothing, just nodded slightly as if giving me permission to speak when I was ready. I took a breath. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, "but I still feel empty." He nodded again, not writing this time. "That's common after long-term trauma," he said, "especially when the conflict ends before the pain does." I looked out the window. A birch tree stood in the courtyard, its branches bare from winter. "I thought cutting ties would fix it," I said, "and it helped, but it didn't fill anything." Dr. Shaw leaned forward. "Healing isn't subtraction, Ethan. It's not just about removing harm, it's about rebuilding, replacing pain with purpose." That stuck with me. The next week I saw a flyer at the university campus while passing through to grab coffee. The engineering department was recruiting mentors for a new program connecting industry professionals with male students in STEM. I took a photo and emailed the coordinator that night. "We'd love to have you," she replied the next morning. "Especially someone with your background." Every Tuesday afternoon, I walked into a seminar room at Seattle Metro University and sat with a group of 6 young men, all different, all eager. We talked about career paths, technical interviews, burnout, imposter syndrome. One kid, Devin, reminded me of myself at 19, quiet, sharp, always watching. After a few weeks, he stayed back after a session. "How did you figure out what kind of engineer you wanted to be?" he asked. "I didn't," I said. "I figured out the kind of person I didn't want to become, and built a career that gave me distance from that." He blinked. "That makes more sense than I expected," he said. I smiled. "We don't always chase dreams. Sometimes we run from patterns." It became a rhythm. Therapy on Friday mornings, mentoring on Tuesdays, work in between. Life didn't rush me anymore. I filled my time with intention. And slowly that hollow space inside started to change. Not fill, just shift. Some wounds don't close all the way, but you stop picking at them. You let them scar over and become part of your story instead of the headline. Dr. Shaw told me during our 5th session that healing is non-linear. You'll have quiet days and you'll have flare-ups, he said, but you're learning how not to spiral. That's progress. He was right. There were still nights when a sound or a phrase cracked open an old room in my mind. But I didn't move in anymore. I just noticed, acknowledged, and kept going. Peace wasn't a destination, it was a habit, and I was finally learning how to practice it. The candlelight flickered gently against the brick wall, casting soft shadows that danced between shelves of second-hand books. The cafe was nearly empty quiet except for low jazz playing through hidden speakers and the occasional clink of ceramic mugs. A small round cake sat in front of me, simple vanilla with chocolate frosting and 30 candles tucked into the center like a forest of tiny fire. Claire leaned over and lit the last candle with a match she struck on the sole of her shoe. "Not exactly OSHA compliant," she joked, grinning. Tracy rolled her eyes and pulled out her phone. "Smile, Ethan. 30 looks good on you." I smiled not because I was told to, but because it came easily. Miles raised a glass of ginger ale and said nothing, just nodded like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had. "Make a wish," Tracy said. I stared at the candles for a second, then closed my eyes. I didn't wish for anything. Not this time. I just stood there in the quiet of my mind and said thank you. Then I blew out the candles. The lights dimmed further. Someone in the back of the cafe clapped once slow and lazy and went back to their laptop. We laughed not because it was funny, but because we could. Claire handed me a wrapped box. Inside was a dark green leather notebook and a fountain pen. "You're good at tech," she said, "but I think you've got stories that don't belong on a screen." Tracy handed me a card she made herself. There was a cartoon version of me on the front holding a coffee cup and looking annoyed. Inside she'd written congrats on not being a total disaster. "Proud of you." Miles didn't give a gift. He didn't need to. He gave me a life back a year ago. I looked at the three of them, my throat catching unexpectedly. Not from sadness, from something softer. Recognition. Belonging. They didn't share my blood, but they'd chosen to stay. They'd shown up, again and again. I used to think family was something you were born into, that you had to fight to be seen, earn your spot, prove your worth. But sitting there surrounded by people who didn't ask for anything except that I show up as myself, I understood. Family was choice. It was consistency. It was the quiet safety of knowing you didn't have to perform. After cake, we stayed late talking about nothing important. Music, movies, politics. Claire tried to convince me to join her hiking group. Tracy teased me for refusing to download dating apps. Miles just listened, smiled, occasionally added dry commentary that made us all laugh harder. When it was time to go, I stepped outside and pulled my coat tighter against the chill. Claire hugged me first, warm and firm the way a sister might. "Proud of you," she whispered. Tracy squeezed my arm. "Don't disappear again, okay? I won't," I said. Miles didn't hug. He just looked at me. "You built a life, Ethan. Not everyone does that." "Thanks to you," I said. "No." "Thanks to you," he replied, then turned and walked to his car. I walked home, the streets quiet, the city wrapped in cold and mist. My apartment was still. The bookshelf light I'd forgotten to turn off glowed in the corner. I sat on the couch, pulled the green notebook from its box, and opened it. On the first page I wrote, "I am not what they did to me. I am what I chose after." And for the first time in years, I meant it. Spring had arrived in Seattle like it always did, quietly all at once. Cherry blossoms burst into soft pink clouds along the sidewalks, and the days stretched out just enough to let the light linger past dinner. I had forgotten what it felt like to move through a season without bracing for impact. One afternoon, after a mentoring session at the university, I stopped by the campus mailroom. I wasn't expecting anything, just a routine check. The clerk handed me a small envelope. No return address. My name handwritten in stiff block letters. Inside was a single-page letter. It was from Mark. He wrote that he was sorry, that he hadn't understood what he was asking from me, that Jake was in a long-term rehab program, that things had fallen apart in ways he hadn't predicted, that he thought about me often, that he missed me, that he wanted to meet, talk, reconnect. I folded the letter and placed it on the bench beside me. I wasn't angry, not anymore, but I also wasn't moved. What could he say now that hadn't already been said in his silence for 3 decades? What apology could undo the quiet erasure of my worth, the casual cruelty of being a background character in my own family I didn't write back? Some endings don't require confrontation. Some peace isn't built on forgiveness. It's built on walking away and not looking back. That weekend, one of the students in the mentorship group asked if I'd record a short voiceover for their final project, a series of clips showcasing the emotional challenges of first-generation STEM students. I sat in the university studio, headphones on mic, positioned, the red light blinking. I cleared my throat and pressed record. I used to live for the approval of a man who never really saw me. I shaped myself around the hope that one day he'd notice, acknowledge love. But that day never came. And I learned something important. You don't need permission to live your own life. You don't need forgiveness to begin again. You just need one clear decision to stop explaining yourself and start existing fully. The student behind the glass window gave me a thumbs up. I removed the headphones and stepped out of the booth. That night I walked home through Pike Place. The crowds had thinned. Street performers packed up their guitars and soapbox kits. The smell of sea salt and spring flowers mingled in the air. My apartment was warm when I entered. Quiet. No echoes of the past, no phantom footsteps. Just mine. I poured a glass of water, sat on the couch, and picked up the journal Claire had given me a year ago. On the last page I wrote, "Some people spend their lives chasing the love they never got." I chose to stop running. And in that stillness I found myself. Then I closed the book. If you've ever lived in a family that asked too much and gave too little, remember this. You don't need forgiveness to begin again. You just need one clear decision and the courage to keep choosing yourself every single day.